Good morning, explorers. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you for your patience as well. We were having a little bit of technical difficulties, but we have finally arrived for today's morning program, which is all about otters. Which, if you're here, I am sure you're a super otter fan. So we'll get a chance to explore these animals, talk about them, make some observations, talk about some of the challenges they face out there in the ocean as well. So I am definitely very, very excited to be able to explore this very fun animal. And if during this program you do have any questions, any observations you want to go ahead and share with us, we do have a live text line that you can use. And you can see that number on the screen right here. That number is 562-286-1838. So if you are watching live this morning and you have any thoughts you really want to share, any questions you want answered, you can feel free to send them into our text line. And I definitely encourage you to do so. So like that, we can discuss your thoughts and we can talk about the things that you're interested in. If you are watching this program after July 30th from around 9 to 9:30 in the morning, you can still send in your questions and your observations, but instead of using this live text line, you're going to want to use our email that you can see on the screen, which is live@lbaop.org. This just ensures that we can still get your questions timely manner. But once again, if you are watching live, you're going to want to use this text line. But if you're watching after the fact, you're going to want to use this email. I'm also not alone in the studio today. I do have Allie, who will be taking all your questions, all your comments, your thoughts, and passing them to me here at the studio. And I also have Erin right in front of me. You can't see her, but she's right there. And she'll be taking us on our otter adventure, showing us all the different pictures, all the different media that we're going to be watching and observing today. So to start off, you might be wondering, where are you? So right now I'm standing in front of our blue cavern exhibit here at the aquarium. So the reason why we started at this blue cavern exhibit is because this is a kelp forest that we can look at. And sea otters live in kelp forest. They're also very important to kelp forest, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But what do you notice about this kelp forest? Let's start off just by making some observations. What can you see? What shapes? What colors? What can you observe? What living things are here and what non-living things make up a kelp forest? Depending on where you're watching too, kelp forests may be very, very local to you. So if you're living down here in Southern California, if you live in Long Beach in this area, if you were to go down to the beachy areas, you would definitely be able to see some of this kelp. If you've been to the beach before, maybe you've seen this kelp, often called seaweed, washed up on the sand. I know sometimes when I'm swimming out there in the water, I just feel the slimy kelp rub against me. But kelp is also super, super important for so many reasons. But now that we've had a couple of seconds to make some initial observations, you may have noticed different things. One big thing to start off, of course, is all of this kelp that we're discussing today. So you can see all of the kelp that makes up this kelp forest. You can see different rocks. We also have lots of different animals in here, right? We have some really big fish. They're very hard to miss. There's also some smaller fish hanging out all around. We had our eel on the camera for a second if you saw the eel swim on by. So you can really get an idea as to how diverse these kelp forests are and all the life that they hold. Sea otters being one of them. So now that we've observed where sea otters live, let's take a look at a sea otter and we can get a closer look as to what they look like. Here we go. One of our sea otters has arrived. So, again, I want to start off with some observations. What do you notice about this sea otter? You can think about your observations in your head. If you want, you can write them down. You can always send in any thoughts and observations to us as well. If you're watching with someone, you can talk to them. But what do you notice about the sea otter? Okay, so one, the first thing I always notice is that they're super cute. But I also notice these different colors, right? So we have brown and we have this whiter color. I see that Gary is saying fur. Gary notices all the fur on the sea otter. And yeah, and we'll talk about the fur more in just a bit, Gary, because this fur is super, super important to otters. So we can see their fur, you can see their little paws. And if you look back here, those look a little bit different, right? So sea otters are going to be spending a lot the time in the water. Sea otters out in their natural habitat in the ocean sometimes will never come out of the water. So their bodies are very much adapted to the fact that they're going to be spending a lot of the time in the water, especially with these back flippers. I also see Rachel as saying that she notices whiskers. So yeah, we can see the little whiskers on a sea otter right here as well. So really great observations, friends. So we've taken a look at a sea otter. We've taken a look at some kelp forest. And now I have a question for all of you. What is a sea otter? Hmm. What group does it belong to? I do want to go ahead and say that sea otters are a lot more like us than we think. Because sea otters, just like me and just like you, are mammals. So, a lot of the same characteristics we have are going to be the same characteristics that otters have. So, I want to go ahead and take the next couple of minutes to talk about, well, what makes a mammal a mammal? We'll talk about 5 characteristics. And one that I want to go ahead and start off with, I want to go ahead and make a list, is what Gary mentioned, which was fur/hair. So if you want, you can make this list alongside me, or you can just watch me make the list. But here we are. I'm going to go ahead and start off by fixing this lighting for you. And then after that, I'm going to go ahead and title my list, What Makes a Mammal a Mammal. And if you know any of these characteristics too, you can go ahead and send them in to us too. So these are going to be special things that make a mammal a mammal. And like I mentioned, I want to start off with the first one that Gary mentioned, which was hair/fur. So all mammals are going to be having this hair/fur at some point in their lives. And speaking about that, look at this sea otter that is just grooming all of that fur it has all over its body. So like I mentioned, sea otter's fur will be super, super important to them. It is also very, very thick. So sea otters are very special in the fact that they lack a layer of blubber. So us, or at least me, I have my nice little layer of blubber right here that helps and keeps me warm. Other animals will also have that. If we're just talking about specific marine mammals, whales will have that, dolphins will have that blubber, but otters won't have that. So they have to stay warm in different ways. One of those ways is going to be this very dense fur that they have, which is some of the densest fur of any animal on the planet. So them cleaning it and keeping it really nice and healthy is really important for their overall health. And to give you a better idea as to how thick this fur is, I'll go ahead and show you this fur pelt that I have here with me today. And we can take a closer look at what this fur looks like. So here is this otter pelt, and it's very brown as you can tell. But what I want to give you an idea of is just look at how much fur is there. And let me zoom in a little bit more. Just fixing this camera for all of us. And just look at that. So I'm going like this so you can get an idea as to how dense this fur is. For every square inch, which is about this big, if you make a little OK sign, this little circle right there, there's around 800,000 to 1,000,000 hairs on a sea otter on every square inch of their fur. So if you're trying to get an idea as to how much hair that is, if you've seen any big adult dogs or anything like that, all the fur they have on their body is what composes that square inch on a sea otter. And I see we have Eloise who has come up with a brilliant question that I want to go ahead and address. And she is asking, why do some have white heads and some brown? So that's a great question, Eloise. And I'm really glad that you've picked up on that with your close observations. So if you look at this sea otter picture we have right now, yeah, we can see it's all brown, but some of the other otters that we've looked at have had that more white head and brown body. So what happens is as otters get older, their fur also turns whiter in coloration, just like us when we get older. So older sea otters will typically have the brown body and then the white head, and younger sea otters, like the one we're seeing in this picture, will be all brown because their fur hasn't started to gray or to whiten. So that is the observation you're making right there, Louise, is if they're younger or if they're older otters. Some otters will stay brown for a little bit longer, but eventually most of them will have that whiter fur. So, like I mentioned, great observation, friends. So we had a chance to talk about how mammals are going to have hair slash fur at most points in their life. Maybe you know someone in your life who doesn't have hair anymore, but at some point they did. So now I want to go ahead and talk about the second thing that makes a mammal a mammal. And if you know any, you can add them to your list. You can just think about them. You can send them in to us. But the second one I want to go ahead and talk about is that otters are warm-blooded. So we had a chance to talk about how important that fur is. And I feel like for otters, these two are very much interconnected. So we had a chance to talk about how important that fur is to otters so they can stay warm. And that is because it's very important that they can stay warm and maintain this body temperature that they have within their bodies. So that fur, there are two different parts to it. You have the outer coat and then you have the inner coat. So that outer coat is what keeps otters completely dry. So their skin is never going to get wet, which is really important again so they can maintain that body temperature. But if that fur isn't taken care of or anything happens to that fur and water can get in and wet their body, they can get different things like hypothermia. They can get very sick. So them being warm-blooded is something important to remember because it's another reason why this fur is really, really important. To give you an idea of the way that this fur works, if you've ever gone snorkeling or if you've ever gone diving or if you've ever worn a wetsuit, you wear the wetsuit and it keeps your skin under dry. That's essentially what this fur works like, is like a wetsuit for them, which is going to be really, really important. The only parts of the water that are really, really, truly wet are going to be their nose or the other areas on their body that don't have any fur. So far we've spoken about how mammals have hair slash fur. We know that they're warm-blooded. There's another one that I want to go ahead and talk about now is how are sea otters born? How are we born? Do we come out of eggs? I always think that's funny to think about if humans are born from eggs. Imagine how big that egg would be. We don't come out of eggs though, right? We give live birth, and so do otters. So that's going to be our third one. So otters are going to be getting pregnant and then they can give birth to their little babies and then they'll teach their babies the first essential things about life. They have to learn how to swim. They have to learn what they can eat and how to get that food, what predators there are. And I see I just got a question and he is asking, do we breed otters? So Hobie, that is a very fun question that will evolve over time with the answer with what we do here at the aquarium because we are working towards that goal of expanding the different ways that we help otters here at the aquarium, and us being able to have babies and raise them will be one to release them. I do want to mention that the otters we see here at the aquarium, this is our exhibit here at the aquarium, is all the otters that we have here are rescues. So for one reason or another, these otters aren't able to be re-released. A lot of these otters are stranded when they're babies. Sometimes they have different sicknesses or something happens to them that for that reason they just wouldn't survive out there in their natural habitat anymore, which is why different zoos and aquariums are able to house these otters. So they are rescues. And then from there, if they have to live within different facilities, they'll go to those different facilities. The other route that can happen is when they are rescued. And if they're showing progress and that they can be successful out in the ocean, then they can be re-released. And then from there, they're monitored to make sure that they're really nice and healthy and thriving out there in those environments. But you can see a couple of our cute otters here, and they do live a very, very great life. We work with them very closely to make sure that they're still practicing natural behaviors that they would be doing out there in the ocean. They get fed every day, and they get the 5-star luxury treatment on his. Our otters are very spoiled. I feel like if I were an animal here at the aquarium, I would want to be an otter. They get to eat all the time and they nap, and sometimes they get special treats. It is truly the life. Um, so yeah, really great question, Hobie, which stay tuned as to what the aquarium will be doing once we are able to expand the way that we work with our otters here. And there's always one that um, that I feel goes hand in hand with live birth. So that to me is that otters and mammals in general, I'm going to put drink slash eat milk. So I feel us as babies, we are going to be drinking our milk, but depending on the mammal, their milk might be a lot chunkier, which I know sounds a little bit gross. So they'll be eating their milk. It's more like nom. It's more, if you can imagine, like tapioca pudding or like cottage cheese. That's what that milk will be like, which is important for different animals in different ways. So if they have to grow faster, that's going to take a lot more energy. So the milk being higher in that fatty content will be very, very important in order for them to grow. So we have one more left. Oh, here we actually have a really great example of our baby seal that we had here 2 years ago. So here we have Kaya, and we have her mom, Shelby. So when Kaya was born, she had to have Shelby's milk and everything. She was also a live birth. So our mammologist and our vet staff had to keep a very close eye as to when Shelby was going to give birth to. But Kaya, if you come and see her now, she is very big. She's like a big sausage. So we've been able to see that growth here and be able to observe these mammals very nicely and closely to see part of those growth aspects. So Shelby's milk was also very fatty, which is how Kaya was able to grow. Right now, in this video we're looking at, you can see she's just really cute and small, but then 2 months after, it's like she was a full-grown seal already. So a lot of these animals will be growing very quickly. And to compare this to otters, what will happen with otter babies, which will be really important for them, is that they'll develop that fur, that outer coat that we were talking about to help them swim. So different things will happen during those first periods of life, which will be very, very important to these animals. So there is one last thing I want to talk about what makes a mammal, which we've all been doing this whole time you've been tuning into this program. Our otters are doing that upstairs right now here at the aquarium. Let's think about it. Let's see if we can gather our thoughts. Let's take a really deep breath. Let it out. We all have to breathe air in order to survive. So breathing air is one thing that all mammals have to do. So otters as well. Most of these marine mammals can, of course, hold their breath a lot longer than we can. But them coming up and breathing that air will be essential to their survival. I will say, sometimes the otters can trick you in the exhibit. Sometimes otters can trick you in the exhibit when they're swimming back and forth that they're very good swimmers, but otters aren't the strongest swimmers out there. So they will definitely use different things to their advantage that we'll go ahead and explore. I do see that Everett is asking, how does otter skin grow between their toes? So that's a really interesting question, Everett, and I'm really trying to think of an answer for you. I would have to imagine that it's kind of like our feet and the way that we have skin in between our toes, and then the fur is able to just grow in those places and cover it. But I really don't have the clearest answer for you as to how the skin is able to grow in between their toes versus that just being their anatomy and them having to grow their skin and their fur in those areas. And I do see that Ella is asking, can otters see well underwater? So to my understanding, otters do have a pretty good visibility, which will be important to them when they're getting different foods out towards the bottom of the ocean and in those different areas. So now I want to go ahead that we've spoken about that otters are mammals. We know about what makes a mammal a mammal. I want to talk more about otters specifically and as to the different things that they do. We know that they spend some of their days grooming. They'll be grooming that fur to keep it really nice and healthy, which is one way that they're able to stay warm since they lack that blubber. The other way is by eating. Otters are going to be eating so much food, and they can eat a lot of different things. They can eat clams, crabs, abalones, urchins, just a plethora of so many things. What do you notice about these things that I just named, though? Do they move around a lot? Are you going to see an abalone swimming at 20 miles per hour? No, right? So a lot of the things that they're actually consuming are not going to be moving around a lot. They're going to be stuck on different surfaces. So that makes it easy for otters to swim on down, pick up their food, and being able to come back up and eat it like the otter we're seeing right here in this video. And that will be really important for them because, like I mentioned, they are not the strongest swimmers. And they also like to conserve that energy. So, does it take more energy to chase after a fish or swim after a fish that's swimming all around? Or does it take more energy to just go down, pick up a sea star from a rock, and come back up and munch on it? The sea star is going to be the better option, right? It's not going to take as much energy. So, that is something sea otters will use to their advantage with their diet. And since they are eating so much, that is really important because they are eating around 25 to 30% of their body weight every single day of their lives. So it is quite a bit of food. So here at the aquarium, we do feed our otters 4 times a day, and we need to make sure they are maintaining those healthy weights and they are getting enough food, since that is essential to their survival and their overall health as well. But there is one food that sea otters eat. I want to go ahead and focus on. I've seen a lot of cute videos, and in the videos are eating different things like clam, sometimes squid or shrimp. But one food that is very important for otters, which fortunately they love, are sea urchins. How many of you like to eat chocolate? So if you're thinking, I love to eat chocolate, this is like a sea otter's version of chocolate, are these sea urchins right here. So take a close look at that sea urchin. What do you see under the sea urchin? A piece of kelp, right? So sea urchins do like to eat kelp. And sometimes they'll eat the leaves, but more likely than not, they'll eat what you call the hold fast area. So this area right here is what you call a holdfast. So different kelps aren't a plant. They're more basic than that. They're what you call an algae. So plants are going to have all those roots that are going to dig into the sand in different places or dirt. So instead of that, algae will be a lot simpler, and they'll have these holdfast, which will just go onto rocks and different platforms like that. And sea urchins love to eat this. So they'll just come gobble, gobble, gobble. And once this is gone, the kelp can't hold on anymore, so the kelp will just float away. So, if we start to think about sea otters eating sea urchins, why do you think it's important for sea otters to be eating these sea urchins? So, it's important for sea otters to also be eating sea urchins, so like that, the sea otters aren't just eating all. So like that, the sea urchins aren't just eating all the holdfast in the kelp up. Sorry, friends, I was tongue-tied myself. But that relationship is super important because if you start to take sea otters out of the ocean, out of the equation, there's not enough sea otters to eat all the sea urchins. All the sea urchins start to eat all those holdfast, and then all that kelp floats away. All those animals leave, and that whole ecosystem just doesn't exist anymore. And we started off today by looking at one of those habitats. So you got an idea as to how diverse those areas are out there in the ocean, and you can just see all of this kelp and how dense these kelp forests really, really are. So these balances and these different relationships we can find within these habitats is really important to be able to maintain. And fortunately now, our sea otter population is doing a lot better than it was at a certain point in time. There was a point in time where there were only around 40 to 50 sea otters left on the entire planet. So during that time, not only were sea otters struggling, but also our kelp forest grew because there were so many urchins just munching on that kelp. But now that sea otters are doing better, we've seen an overall improvement on our kelp forest too, since that sea urchin population is being kept in check. So you might be wondering, well, what are some different ways that we can help sea otters or our kelp forests and these ecosystems? One way is by just simply talking about them. You tuning in today and learning more about sea otters and about these balances, making some observations, asking questions is one way we can really be helping our oceans out actively. One of the best ways. And then if you run into one of your friends or if you want to talk to your parents or someone in your life about it, you can tell them about one thing you learned, and then they'll be learning a new thing too. So spreading knowledge and the different things that we know can really help these animals out. So that's always the biggest one I like to go ahead and share. So with that being said, friends, I do want to say thank you so much for tuning in today. If you do have any last questions that you want to share with us, feel free to email or live at aop.org. And also, I want to let you know that starting next week, we are starting our summer kids club. So it's going to be some new classes or some old favorites that we'll have coming up for the next week. So I definitely do invite you to join in on our summer kids club. And you can find all those different links on our aquarium website or on our YouTube page as well. But now that I've said that, I do once again want to thank you so much for tuning in today, and I'll see you on the otter side.